Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work, learn and live, the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Bunurong people. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to welcome all of you here today to our last seminar for this year. It's great to see people in person, but also online. So thank you for joining us. And this seminar really gives us an opportunity to highlight the diverse, impactful range of research that people here at the Centre are undertaking in order to advance the welfare of our captive and domestic animals. It's been a really challenging year for us here at the Centre as we have come to terms with the passing of Professor Andrew Fisher. But his impact on the lives of animals endures through his ongoing significant impact on the people at the Centre as well as our work. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to briefly hand over to Jeremy Scoose, who is going to guide us through the day. So please help me in welcoming Jeremy.
Thank you, Lauren, for inviting me to speak today. I've just got a couple of things which are important for a man of my age, for the people who are in this audience. If you want to go to the toilet, you go out of there, you head that way as far as you can, and you turn right. Please make sure your mobile phones are turned off. And I welcome everybody online. I think there's probably 150 people I was informed of before who are online. Yeah, so I've got a history of working at the Animal Welfare Science Centre, and I don't now. I work for Scalexia, which is a firm of poultry and swine veterinarians. But the work that the centre does is important not only for the animals, but crucially for the sustainability of the industries in which we have in Australia and worldwide. So we shouldn't forget that. It's not just about animal welfare, it's how animal welfare impacts the sustainability of our industries. So what we've got up, I don't know whether you've got your programs open in front of you or online. We've split the day into 4 sessions. It's really 3 sessions. And it's meant to be a snapshot of the research which is being undertaken at the centre. Some of the presentations are longer presentations, 8 to 12 minutes, and some of them are very short, sharp, 3-minute presentations by some of the students. So what we'd like to do first is talk about the effect of people and practice, what people do on animals. And I mean, that's something that I think is so important. Now, I think no matter what the conditions the animals are in, within reason, then people can ameliorate some of the conditions that animals are in. They're the most important part of the equation, I think. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Lauren up again. Lauren's senior lecturer at Melbourne University. She specialises in the human-animal relationship, and Lauren is also acting director of the Animal Welfare Science Centre. Lauren's going to be talking about all the developments, and there are many which are happening in with ProHand this year and moving into next year. So thanks, Lauren. And I think I've forgotten something.
That's right, we'll go first.
Oh, we have these series of questions which are going to come up on Menti. And the first one, I think, was, where are you from? Well, we'll work that out later.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to try and move quite quickly. I've only got 8 minutes. That's going to be a challenge. But as Jeremy mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about ProHand, which hopefully you're all familiar with. If not, I'm going to give you a really quick snapshot, and then I'm going to consider the research that we are now doing that focuses in on ProHand. So as Jeremy mentioned, we all feel really quite strongly around the fact that the human component is one of, if not the most important factors when it comes to animal welfare. And I think you're really going to get a sense of that throughout this first session. So we all know that we see a range of different human-animal interactions occurring in all of our different animal uses. And these interactions are often intense and frequent, and it results in the development of human-animal relationships. There's a number of studies that have shown the importance of these human-animal interactions and the subsequent human-animal relationship that develops, the importance of those for both the welfare of the animal and, as Jeremy said, also the human. So these studies that have largely involved farm animals have shown that animals may associate humans with both rewarding and aversive events that occur around that human-animal interaction. So, for example, around feeding or perhaps around some form of husbandry procedure. And as a result, we see that these conditioned responses start to develop. Now, when we're thinking about human-animal interactions and we're thinking about human behaviour, I need to stop wiggling my arms around, we tend to think about classifying this human behaviour based upon the response of the animal, so the nature of that response. We see that there are negative human behaviours, and these are behaviours that are aversive to the animal, that they increase fear in that animal. And when we're thinking about these negative behaviours, some of them are quite obvious. So thinking around things like hits and slaps. But we also have really quite subtle behaviours as well, which are things such as fast speed of movement. It may be banging and loud noises. It may be shouting. On the other hand, we also have positive behaviours, and these are non-aversive interactions. So these generally bring about positive or neutral experiences, and in some instances, we may actually see them be rewarding. And these generally work towards reducing fear of humans. Now, the model of human-animal interactions within the livestock industry, as you can see here, which was developed by Hemsworth and Coleman, forms the basis of the sequential relationship which investigates these human-animal interactions and the human-animal relationship, based upon the theory of planned behaviour, whereby human or intended behaviour is the product of three salient or cognitive events, so our salient beliefs. So that is that our behaviour is best predicted by our attitude towards that behaviour. There's been considerable research within the livestock industries that's demonstrated these sequential relationships, whereby human attitudes predict human behaviour. Human behaviour affects animal behaviour, and it's predominantly focused on fear because of the implications of fear on both productivity and welfare. And that animal behaviour then has a strong link with animal production and, importantly, animal welfare. And you can see there that it also feeds back into the human. So animals' behavioural response, their welfare and their productivity outcomes are also feeding back, influencing human attitudes, human behaviour, as well as some of those job characteristics. So importantly, this sequential relationship suggests that we can target stock person or human attitudes and behaviour using training in order to improve them, therefore to improve animal welfare outcomes. And this really forms the basis of ProHand, which is the cognitive behavioural training program, which works to target stock person attitudes in order to improve behaviour. So really focusing on reducing those negative interactions or handling behaviours and to promote those positive behaviours. So ProHand aims to target those to begin with, and then it aims to improve or to maintain that change. Considerable research again has gone on looking at intervention studies to demonstrate the effectiveness of ProHand. And you can see two papers there which show that through ProHand, we're able to target stock person behaviour in a number of different species, improve those attitudes to those different key interactions, improve stock person behaviour, so increase positive interactions, reduce negative interactions and negative behaviour to only what is necessary. And as a result, we see significant increases in terms of welfare. So we see reduced fear, improvements in productivity and therefore welfare. So a really quick snapshot of ProHand, and I'm about to get cut off because I'm heading close to time. But just in terms of where we're at, it's a really exciting time for ProHand. There's a lot of work going on. When it comes to ProHand Dairy, we've got two key areas that we're working in. We have a current project where we're collaborating with a number of people throughout the US and in Canada, looking at a USDA Ideas grant, which is really looking to take ProHand, adapt it to the US market to improve handling within the US dairy. And that is really also targeted at improving consumer trust. So that importance of being able to demonstrate that not only is welfare valued, but also the people that are involved in that industry to improve those interactions. We also, more closer at home, have a collaboration at the moment with Saputo, where we are looking to revise ProHand Dairy for the Australian and the New Zealand markets. So essentially putting it back out there, which is really important. When it comes to pigs, we have two key areas at the moment as well. You can see there we have ProHand Pigs SE, which is a really exciting collaboration with people at the Swedish Livestock University, where we are looking to adapt ProHand Pigs to the Swedish conditions, also translate it into Swedish, as well as adding a transport module based upon some PhD work that has recently occurred. So again, the development and delivery of this program in Sweden, we're going to also, within this situation, we're going to deliver it, look at it as an intervention. And interestingly enough, we're delivering it in two different methods. So we're looking at the impact of delivery mode, which is really important at the moment as well. So looking at facilitated delivery in person like we are today, but also looking at a delivery online, because we recognise the challenges of bringing together people in a facilitated in-person manner. So some really interesting outcomes that will come out of that program. Importantly as well, we're also working on ProHand Pig Abattoir revision. So ProHand Pig Abattoir was developed about 20 years ago. The science for which it was based upon was at a single abattoir. We've seen significant changes in the Australian abattoir industry more recently. And so we are now heading out and we're going to do research across the broad range of abattoir systems that we see here in Australia. Bronwyn and Linde, who are going to follow me, will tell you a little bit more about that. But it's really important because we're going to examine those stock person attitudes and stock person behaviour, as well as pig behavioural responses under a number of different conditions. The outcomes of that research will then be used to redevelop ProHand Abattoir to ensure that it's effective for the current situation. And we all know the challenges that are involved with an abattoir setting. And so it's important that we have high impact, important, useful information that can help improve handling within that situation. Really quickly, where to next? If I'm thinking about where we need to be moving when it comes to human-animal interaction research and ProHand, three key areas. Thinking a little bit about human-animal interactions around transport. Another really challenging situation for our animals, all of our livestock species. So important that we start to investigate that. We also see transport drivers asking for support and tools that enable them to better do their jobs. So we have a grant in at the moment that's focused on pigs, looking at transport driver attitudes and behaviour and pig behaviour responses around transport. Also thinking about ProHand Pigs, we've seen a considerable change within the industry since ProHand Pigs was last adapted. So I think we will look to revise ProHand Pigs, particularly around farrowing and lactation. We're seeing really significant changes with regards to the way in which sows and piglets are housed in Australia and around the world. This shift around traditional confinement systems to more loose systems. So looking at those attitude, behaviour, animal behaviour responses as well. And then finally, not all about livestock. So we are keen to also explore a little bit further within the zoo. So considerable work's been done looking at visitor effects, the effect of visitors on zoo animals, but we also need to think about the keeper. So keen to explore those keeper attitudes and behaviour and zoo animal behaviour a little bit more. I think I've taken up more than my 8 minutes, so I'd just like to really quickly also acknowledge the collaborators, both within the centre as well as internationally, and importantly as well, our funding bodies. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lauren. And I should have mentioned earlier at the start that please hold your questions, because at the end of each session we'll have a panel session where we'll get to ask questions then. So please hold on to them. What I'd like to do now is introduce Linde Ornek to you. Linda's a research intern from the Netherlands. She's interested in human-animal interactions, of course, and animal behaviour. And Linda's going to be talking about how we might measure stock person behaviour and attitudes at pig abattoirs in Australia. So thanks, Linda.
Yes, and I can start. Well, my name is Linde, and as Jeremy mentioned, I'm a student at Wageningen University from the Netherlands. And because of my interest in human-animal interactions, I got the opportunity to be part of this research center, and I've been part of the ProHand Pig Abattoir project, where the aim is to actually measure a person's attitude and behavior. So the effect of negative handling, it could have negative effect on fruitfulness, so but also on job satisfaction or even meat quality. So this data will be used to update the training program of ProHand. And here you can see a little map, because we're going into commercial abattoirs across Australia to do the direct observations of the behaviors. So you can see that the stars are the stock person and the triangles are the observers. So that are the key points where we expect that the most human-animal interaction will occur. So the pigs will be held in the pens and they will be pushed into the race. And the race will lead to the stunning area. And with the backloader, they will be pushed in the stunning area. So the slaughter process will begin. So we're actually going to record the frequency of the behaviors within the abattoir. Using this direct observations of both the stock person and the pig. For the stock person, the behaviors are divided into 4 categories, like mild negative, moderate negative, high negative, or positive. And we don't actually expect high negative interaction, but then you can think about like forceful slapping or even kicking. And with positive, it could be more like petting the pigs or resting the hand on the back. And we're also going to look at vocalizations, so like shouting or talking in a soft voice. And for the pigs, some kind of behaviors, there's like mounting, slipping, falling, or escape. But we're also going to score the vocalizations. And to measure the attitude, the stock person will fill in like a questionnaire. And there are general themes within these questionnaires, like general beliefs about the pigs, the attitudes towards the interaction, job satisfaction, or job knowledge. And here you can see a little example. So there are certain statements. For example, I enjoy working in teams rather than my own. Pigs are hard to work with, or pigs are entertaining to watch. And then there's we're going to measure the level of agreement with those statements. So we get a more like broader idea of how they think about the industry and working with the pigs and about the job itself. So the expectation is that attitude is actually a predictor of the behavior, and that the negative handling, for example, increases fearfulness. So by changing the attitude, we can actually improve that kind of behavior. So we expect more positive behavior and thereby also increase animal welfare.
Thanks, Linda. And then we're carrying on with ProHand Abattoir. So Bronwyn Stevens, who's got a long history with the centre. Bronwyn has got a research and teaching relationship here at the University of Melbourne. And she's currently acting as a research assistant on the ProHand Abattoir revision project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, so we've heard a lot about ProHand, but I just wanted to dig into a bit more about why it's so critical that we are actually updating this program. So looking at the importance of updating stock person training in pork abattoirs. And thank you for Lauren and for Linde for that great introduction into this topic. For my mind, ProHand is such a successful training package for three main reasons. One, it is science-based, two, it is industry relevant, and three, it is targeted. So having training that is really industry specific, and Lauren pointed out we're going to be going to the US and adapting it to the US, it needs to be relevant to the industry you're going into. We look at the original seminal work that was done around to establish the original ProHand abattoir. As Lauren pointed out, this was over 20 years ago. This study is old enough to drink. And so what we need to know is what's changed in that industry and how might that be impacting some of those attitudes and behaviours. First up, pigs. The pigs, when you're working in an abattoir, the environment that they're coming into is very challenging, and there's a whole lot of experience that goes into those animals. Changes in things like sow housing, increased use of things like Improvac, all of those impact those pigs and their experience. So we need to look at what is currently happening. Stock people, the key element to this program is the stock people. And we need to go in and ask some of those background factors and understand what is the cohort of stock people that it currently exists. How can we make that training that is relevant? I'm sure we've all sat through training that doesn't fit for us. It's really hard. Society. Broadly, as a society, our expectations around what is appropriate handling, what is appropriate interactions with animals have changed. We expect much higher levels of interactions. We expect animals to be provided much more with positives rather than just minimising negatives. Finally, facilities. We've seen an increase in automation. So a lot of these, particularly the export abattoirs, now have automated gates. They handle pigs in groups. So we're not handling animals individually going to stun in these big facilities. And that has some really great implications for those pigs. But in terms of minimising those negative handlings, we don't actually know what those impacts are. So what are some of the sticking points? What are some of the challenges around that? And that's why we need to go back in, do this work and try and get some really good answers that we can go forward with. So finally, just very quickly finish up, I just wanted to say that for us to continue to provide the training that is science-based, industry relevant and targeted, it really needs to be updated so that we are representing the current industry, and that industry partnership and working with industry to gain that access is so important. Thank you.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Yeah, it's really encouraging to see the support we're getting from the abattoir sector at the moment. So the 7 export abattoirs with pigs in Australia, and we're working with one domestic abattoir in Western Australia as well. So it's encouraging. Okay, we're away from pigs now. We're on to sheep, and I'd like to introduce you to Madeleine Woodruff. So Madeleine's a PhD candidate with the centre. How long have you got to go, Maddie? 1 year to go, so 1 year and counting. Maddie's investigating sheep tail docking procedures, and today she's going to be talking about ewe docking. Are they too short?
Okay, so I'll be presenting a study from my PhD that was published earlier this year. So as Jovi mentioned, my PhD is on sheep tail docking practice and specifically tail docking length. So wanting to support and encourage producers, or investigating how we can do that, to dock at the recommended length. So as an earlier study in my PhD, we wanted to essentially ask producers, are you docking tails too short? And we did a survey to ask that question. So most sheep in Australia are born with tails, and they'll have their tails docked as lambs. And this has been a practice that's been done for centuries and across many countries to reduce soiling of the breech and reduce that risk of fly strike. So fly strike is caused by blowflies that lay eggs in the soiled wool, and the hatching maggots then infest the sheep, and this can become a really severe welfare issue. And as sheep are managed extensively in Australia in large flocks, intervention actually sometimes is not possible, or timely intervention. So tail docking has become a relied on preventive practice for fly strike. So there was a lot of research done finding that tail docking was effective in reducing that risk of fly strike, but it's only beneficial if the tail length is just right. So the research into the ideal tail docking length demonstrated that the fly strike risk was reduced when tails were long enough to cover the vulva, or an equivalent length in males, which is about 3 joints of the tail. Some research actually found that 4 joints, so 1 joint longer than recommended, was actually the best to reduce the risk of fly strike. But this wasn't approved by producers due to the beliefs around this length increasing dags and soiling, interfering with mating, and increasing the difficulty of shearing and crutching. So this length was a bit of a compromise. So docking shorter than recommended, so not covering the vulva or shorter than 3 joints, actually increases the risk of cancer because it exposes the perineum, increases the risk of rectal and vaginal prolapses as it interferes with the muscle attachments, and leaves larger wounds, which are at increased risk of infection and subsequent arthritis. And it actually increases the risk of fly strike. So that's a bit counterintuitive, but the theory is that as the muscles are weaker, there's less control over the tail and there's less direction of excretion, leading to more soiling and therefore fly strike. So in Australia, there have been a lot of surveys over the past 20 years indicating that a lot of producers are docking tails too short, so between 22 and 55%. And there was an on-farm study done in 2017 that measured tails of over 3,000 ewes and found that 86% of those tails did not cover the vulva. So the aim of this study was to investigate current tail docking length as reported by producers, investigate producers' knowledge and attitudes of tail docking and tail docking length. So in the survey, we included 3 photos to capture producers' current practice. And we wanted their response to vulva coverage. So we had A, which was quite obviously too short with the anus and vulva exposed. We had B, which was halfway covering the vulva, and then C, which was a bit longer than recommended, so it's more like 4 joints and fully covering that vulva. And we also asked about the producers' knowledge, so whether they're aware there was a recommended length, and we asked them to describe that recommended length to us. We also asked the importance of tail docking, docking at their chosen length and docking at the recommended length. And we also asked about their perceptions of shearing and crutching tails that are the same length of the vulva being more difficult, and whether shearers prefer short tails. So the key results were that more than half of the participants actually chose the short tail image B to represent their practice, with the remainder choosing, most of the remainder choosing image C. While the images might not have captured all, lengths of tail, and they might not have related to either of the tails, this is interesting that producers would lean towards a shorter tail than a longer tail. In terms of knowledge, a quarter of participants said they weren't aware or there was not a recommended tail docking length. Of those who were aware of the recommended length, 30% described it to be shorter than it should be. And of those participants in light green who knew the recommended length, they actually, 60% chose the short tail image. So that indicates a knowledge practice gap. In terms of attitudes, tail docking was important for producers to reduce the risk of fly strike, and it was important to dock at their chosen length. It was significantly more important to dock at their chosen length rather than the recommended length. They did tend to agree that shearers preferred short tails, but they tended to disagree that tails at the recommended length actually made shearing or crutching more difficult. So there were significant associations between choosing image B and describing the recommended length to be shorter than it is. And this may mean that producers who aren't aware of the recommended length can't then implement that in practice. Being in South Australia, which has also been reported by other survey research, but we're not really sure why this is. And practicing mulesing, which may be related to hiring external contractors to mules and tail dock. So the results of this study indicate that short tail docking remains a welfare concern for the Australian sheep industry, that there is a gap in knowledge of the recommended length, but also that there's a knowledge practice gap. So those who know the recommended length and can accurately describe it, still potentially not implementing that in practice. The results provide context and justification for the major study of my PhD, which is a practice change intervention. And in that we support and provide knowledge to producers to dock at the recommended tail length. And given the potential health, production and welfare implications of short tails, this area of research remains relevant to improve sheep welfare. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. Moving on to dogs. We're lucky now to have Xiao Xuan, who's a recent honours student here at the Melbourne University. And her honours project explored veterinary opinions on dog behaviour problems. So welcome, Xiao.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You just did it twice, you should stop. There you go. And you might need to press that at all.
So good morning. My name is Shen, and I'll be sharing my research on the veterinarian's perspective on canine behavior problems. So dog behavior problems are frequently observed in dogs, and it can lead to serious welfare concerns. It was found that owners often go up to the vets when it comes to behavior problems. So my question is, can they address these issues effectively? And my research explored their knowledge, attitudes, and practices. I created an online survey for veterinarians to participate in, and the survey consists of questions that allows me to assess veterinarians. Parts of this survey is actually replicated from those found in Shall We All. And one of the major findings that I found is that there may be a correlation between the frequency of discussion and the confidence level of veterinarians. So the most discussed topics were also found to be those that veterinarians have most confidence in discussing, same for the least discussed topics. However, I did not get to confirm the correlation because I only did simple data analysis. And another major finding is that positively reinforcing fear is poorly understood. This topic was reported to be frequently discussed, and vets have most confidence in discussing, however, their knowledge reflected differently. Other areas that lack understanding include the use of aversive tools and punishment-based methods, as well as the use of positive reinforcement and reward-based methods. The application of these training advices or methods were not fully understood because some of them demonstrated poor understanding and some demonstrated good understanding. In terms of behavior treatments, veterinarians acknowledge the importance of combining medication and behavior modification. Something to note is that some of them still believe it's not important for owners to engage with, moving on to referral practices. Again, looking back at thunderstorm and noise phobia, it was reported to be frequently discussed and vets are most confident in discussing. However, some of the respondents still believe that it's not important for owners to engage with a professional, especially including veterinary professionals. So who should they be consulting with? Lastly, the barriers and challenges that veterinarians face when addressing behavior problems is insufficient veterinary education. Other challenges are they also stated that some of the barriers that they face is they have insufficient veterinary education, which did not fully prepare them to support behavior inquiries.
And that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Xuan. Okay. Thank you. Okay, next up is Carolina Hess. She's also got a long history of the centre. She completed a PhD here 3 years ago, something, maybe longer. Maybe longer than that. So Cara's a lecturer here at the Melbourne Vet School and has a significant expertise in the welfare of sheep. And today Cara is going to be talking about mulesing. To mules or not to mules? That is the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good. Okay, good morning. So thank you for the introduction, Jeremy. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the findings, some of the key findings of this project that I have spent quite some time. It's my postdoc that I did with a range of experts in the field, and I have a few collaborators here in the room today. So first of all, how many of you know what mulesing is? You show hands. Experts, beautiful. We'll skip that part there. So if you're not too sure about what mulesing is, just to sort of be on the same page, it's a surgical procedure and it is the removal of a strip of wool bearing from around the back of the breech of the sheep. And this is done to prevent fly strike. And Muddy already talked a little bit about what fly strike is, and I'm going to show you a few photos. I should set trigger warning. So there are a few confronting images in this presentation because we're going to be talking about a very controversial husbandry practice in the sheep industry. So that's what it looks like. And it's basically what is happening. There is an open wound, and by creating this open wound, the edges of that wound will try to get together, and that's how they tightened that breech area of the sheep. And this is done to reduce the amount of wrinkles in that area, because when sheep have a lot of wrinkles, that's a great environment for moist and feces to accumulate, and that will attract the flies. So this is what looks like in the long term. So after it's healed, it tightens that skin. And by having less wrinkles in that area, it reduces the risk of breech fly strike. And that's important because fly strike can occur in different locations within the body of the sheep, but the most common incidence is in the breech area. Now, mulesing was developed by John Mules, hence the name, in 1930s to prevent fly strike. This is fly strike. So if you didn't picture what Muddy was saying, so the flies will deposit the eggs in the skin of the sheep, and then the larvae will eat the skin and the flesh. And it's very painful. It's a very important welfare concern for the sheep. And this is devastating to see for producers. And when it happens, can happen quite quickly, and it can spread significantly in the flock. And this is mulesing. Now, Australia is quite particular in that sense, and originally in my presentation it says current prevalence of mulesing in Australia, but then I removed Australia because mulesing is only happening in Australia at the moment. And it's quite interesting because there's a number of reasons that I guess we need to take into account. The extensiveness of the sheep industry in Australia. Flock sizes can be quite large. They're managed outdoor all year round with limited monitoring. So that can contribute to the prevalence of mulesing these days. But mulesing is painful. There's vast amount of research supporting the welfare problems for the animals, and it's one of the most controversial practices. And it has received a lot of public scrutiny, and the wool industry has been targeted quite harsh. And one of the main campaigns started in 2004, and this year we're celebrating 20 years since the wool industry announced a ban by 2010, and clearly that hasn't been achieved. Now, I said the wool industry has been the main industry targeted in this issue, and that's because merinos are very susceptible to fly strike because they're so wrinkly. But is mulesing exclusive to the wool industry? Let's find out. So that was my research question for this big project that was funded by MLA. And at the beginning, everyone was like, "You're crazy, Cara, that's not happening. What are you even investigating this?" So what we did a cost-benefit analysis to assess the costs associated with phasing out mulesing in the sheep meat industry. We did a review of the New Zealand experience with banning mulesing. They banned mulesing in 2019. And then we did a component of surveys and focus groups to look at practices and producer attitudes around that, with the idea of developing an intervention strategy. So I'm going to be talking about this part. We look at practices and attitudes through focus groups, phone interviews. We talked to producers, we talked to shearers, and we did a national survey. So Maddie and Asha spent a lot of time with me talking to producers and analysing their attitudes and their perceptions. What did we find with this national survey that we did? We did have a good distribution of respondents, and we found that 56.2% of respondents reported to run mulesed operations. Almost 40% in the meat-focused industry, 64% in wool-focused operations, and 68% in the meat wool enterprises. Now, the wool industry might be underrepresented because we were targeting meat-focused and meat wool producers. So bear that in mind. But it was still very interesting for me to see that there's 14% of meat-focused enterprises reporting they are mulesing. Majority of them were using merino mothers in their enterprises. So the merino mothers were the ones being mulesed, not necessarily the lambs that were sold for slaughter. And most responders were using topical pain relief. That is trisulfan, which is done after the mulesing procedure. We look at farm characteristics that might have some relationship with the decision to run mulesed or unmulesed operations, and we found some significant relationships with flock size, rainfall, and state. So we found that smaller flock sizes, so less than 1,000 head, are more likely to run unmulesed operations, and larger flocks are more likely to run mulesed operations. There were less mulesed operations reported in summer rainfalls, and Western Australia was the state that reported the majority of the mulesed operations in the survey that we ran. We also look at correlations and relationships with farmer characteristics. We look at education, age and gender, and education came up as a significant relationship. So producers that reported higher education were more likely to run unmules operations. And we look at also the attitudes around producers that were running mules operations. What were their perception about the issue? So they tend to have more positive views about mulesing. They perceive a higher risk of fly strike. They don't trust the alternatives to fly strike, like genetics and crutching and using chemicals. And they think they're costly and time-consuming, and they perceive shearers as a main stakeholder that prefer mulesed sheep. So we look at a structural model. We put all these factors into a blender, and interesting, we found that the perceived difficulty or ease in phasing out mulesing was the main predictor in the decision to run mules or non-mules operations. And then we have perceived need for mulesing, the influence of shearers, rainfall, and economic incentives. So that is telling us that attitudes are an important driver for the decision to run non-mules operations. But some important conclusions from this is that mulesing is still one of the most important husbandry practices to use to reduce the incidence of fly strike, occurs across all type of enterprises. But the fact that attitudes are drivers, it gives us the opportunity to trial a targeted program, an intervention program to support farmers transition to non-mules operations.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Also, I'd just like to say that with the short presentations we had today, they were 3-minute presentations, we put a pretty unfair imposition on those speakers where the slides changed every 20 seconds, whether they liked it or not. So I think that I would not have handled that very well at all, but I think most of them handled it, all of them handled it in a well manner. Thank you. So now, if I can work this, we are now going to be asking for your input into what?
That's okay. I've just got questions.
Oh, sorry.
Questions.
So we're going to be asking for your input now in Menti. Yeah?
Just out loud.
What?
Just out loud. It's not working.
It's not working. Okay. Oh, God. I told you we should use Slido. Oh, we're back again.
Where are we from?
Yep.
Okay, so where are you? We're not doing the where are you from, are
That's
we?
right. Let's just read out this one.
Okay.
Read it out.
And are they going to be able to put it into the? Okay.
It's the
All right.
responses then.
Okay, so those of you online, apologies for this. Those of you online, maybe you could just put it into the chat so that we get an understanding of where you're from. Are you from? No, we don't want that one. Don't want that one.
Where are we from?
Do you want to go to where are we from?
Well, I don't know. I was asked to.
On the Menti.
Yeah.
If Menti is working.
Yeah.
Ah, it is working. Great. Good. Okay, so this is where you're from, which is one of the very first questions that I forgot to ask right at the beginning. So unsurprisingly, most people are from a research organisation, as staff or student, changing a little bit, government and policy, good, producer, good. Good to see some producers here. Hello, Geordie, if you're out there. Animal managers, none. RD&E group, good to see some RD and E's here. Bit of not-for-profit. Hi, Glenys. Good. Okay. So let's move on. I think we can close that now. So it's a broad church, which is good.
Well, this
Okay.
was at the very start.
Okay, well, we might as well do it now
Yeah.
because it captures it for us later on. So what we'd like to do is to ask you now to go to your Menti, which should still be open. What are you hoping to get from today's showcase? And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, I think, options there, and something else.
You can choose.
Nice cup of coffee here, but not online. Good. Good. New scientific knowledge is the major one. Innovation coming up later. Not sure. I'm glad that's good. Nobody's not sure. All of the above, discuss animal welfare issues I'm concerned about. Well, this is your chance now because we'll be breaking into a panel session in a second. A bit of guidance on policy and to build the network. Great, terrific. Let's close that one. And where are we up to? Here.
We'll try again.
Okay. So after listening to the presentations that you've just had, what do you think? You need to order these on Menti in terms of whether you think past experience, education, other people's opinions, newspaper articles or news articles, social media or cultural belief is a major influencer of stock persons' attitudes towards animals. Yeah. Great, thank you. It's interesting that opinions of others ranks fourth. I would have thought that would have been a little bit higher. Let's leave that for the panel session. Okay, and then the next one is, what do you think influences people's attitudes towards pets specifically? And I think it's your own pet, if you have one, which most people do. Is this not working? Ah, good. So it's the same.
Social media is ranked.
Yeah. Yep.
Past experience.
Past experience. Well, that's and also what you see other people doing. Yeah. Possibly. Whether in Springfield, Ohio, might be the cultural belief. Okay, that's good. All right, well, thank you. So what I'd like to do now is to call up the speakers from the previous presentations, and they can all gather up here, and we'll take questions from the room. And I know Mia's monitoring the chat section, and we'll be asking questions from those people online. So gather behind me. I'll stand out of the way here and see what comes up.
Thanks for a terrific opening session, everyone. They were a fantastic variety of talks. Lauren, our first question's for you from On Ben David. On's asking, what about ProHand involvement with the poultry industry? So layers and broilers and possible variations and differences when we're looking to the future of ProHand.
Very good point. We are keen. There has been some work looking at particularly around human-animal interactions in laying hens. Most of that was done, though, within a cage system. So I think we have seen a shift, as we're all now, I think, familiar with, to our alternative systems. So there is I think, a really clear need within both our laying hen industry, but also within our meat chicken. So it's not for lack of want. I think it's just we need the funding and to enable us to do that. But yes, a really key point. So we would, and we talk about it regularly. We have our resident poultry expert, and we talk quite a bit.
Stay tuned for more poultry with Dr. Peter Taylor coming up soon. So moving along, probably this could be one for Bron or Lauren, or both of you. So someone who works in intensive pig production has asked a question about pressures behind human-animal interaction of production animals, pressure on the staff managing the animals to continue to increase profitability and production with less staff per animal obviously leads to stress, which can then lead to more negative attitudes towards the animals as some of their behaviours slow down daily tasks. How do we get people in corporate management and stakeholders who are not working with the animal and who are driving this increase on production pressure on board to allow stock hands to practice these more positive management strategies, even if it may be in some ways less efficient?
Yeah. That's an important point. I think we see it in all forms of animal use industry, this perceived pressure around time and an inability to be able to take the time to perform those positive human-animal interactions. And they're important for not only the animal, but we see the importance of them for the stock person as well. And the opportunity for those interactions leads to greater job satisfaction, work motivation, and whatnot through that feedback loop. I think where we are at the moment is there is a lot of work that's going into positive human-animal interactions, the opportunity for those positive experiences for animals. When we're thinking about animal welfare, we know that it's no longer just the absence of negative. It is very much around the opportunity for positive. When we're talking about that opportunity for a good life, the need for those, I think as we now have more science that backs that up, it provides greater reinforcement for why it is important to take the time to enable us to be ensuring that we're having those positive experiences. And a key way of doing that is those positive human-animal interactions. And we are also seeing some evidence around positive human-animal interactions, reducing those negative interactions and the ongoing benefit then for productivity outcomes.
Yeah, that's terrific. Our next questions.
Sorry, can I? So one of the key things about ProHand is it's not inefficient. It actually boosts productivity. It boosts staff retention. It's not an inefficient way of handling animals.
Yeah.
And in fact, it can often make the job easier, and you often get, milk yield, somatic cell count reductions, health, etc. So it's not inefficient. It's just a cultural change sometimes.
It's a really good point. So some of the research that we've been doing as well has been looking at what is quite small periods of positive human contact. So 5 minutes a day, perhaps. So small amounts that are perhaps more feasible that you can implement within your day.
All right, our next questions are for Maddie. So Maddie, the first one is from Laurel Barrett, who says, in New Zealand, tail docking length is prescribed in the animal welfare regulations. Do you foresee any similar direction in Australia to move from a recommendation to an enforceable standard for tail length?
So in the welfare standards and guidelines in Australia, the standard is to leave one joint of the tail. And it's recommended that tails cover the vulva in ewes and equivalent length in males. So the recommendation and the standard are there. But I know that a few years ago now there was talk of leaving the standard to be 2 joints of the tail. But there was a lot of consultation around that, and I think producer groups submitted a lot of reports and things to say that they didn't want there to be sort of legal implications around accidentally going short. So I think there was a lot of pushback of making that the standard longer. So I don't think the standard will change anytime soon. I can't see that. Yeah.
And then the other question is a little bit more about how to apply the findings of your research. So could you please explain how you believe you'll approach the knowledge practice change?
So in the intervention study that we have finished but not fully analysed the results of, we developed in a way similar to the ProHand sort of thing, where we have integrated sort of the knowledge, so a bit of education, and also taken into account sort of the capability and the opportunity of producers in the intervention. So knowledge is a piece of that, but so the intervention essentially kind of tries to capture each individual producer's context and to then change their beliefs and attitudes towards the recommended tail docking length. Yes, so the results of that are forthcoming.
Thanks, Maddie.
Essentially the next showcase.
In a year's time.
Yeah, tune in next year for updates in this space. Now, Caro, you can stay up by the microphone. We've got a couple of questions for you. One person's asked, can you just explain a bit more about what you mean by low trust in mulesing alternatives?
Oh, yeah.
So there are alternatives to mulesing. So producers that want to phase out mulesing, they're encouraged to breed for plainer sheep. They can implement more monitoring, more, rigorous management and chemicals, the use of long-term chemicals. So, and there are a number of resources available about the recommendations and the alternatives, but a lot of the producers that we talk to that are running mules operations are not, they're either not accessing that information, but they don't trust the results of those studies or what is in those fact sheets. They don't think the long-term use of chemicals is going to be beneficial for them. They're actually quite scared of chemical resistance, and they don't think breeding it's for them because they're quite cautious about changing the type of sheep that they are farming. So there are a lot of concerns around that for those producers.
Two more quick ones. So this is just yes or no. Could a vaccine prevent fly strike?
There's a question for Ben.
Yes.
I'm aware that there's a good study happening at the moment at Melbourne Uni, and they are in the process of investigating if that's feasible. I think it's under investigation. I'm not, by all means, part of that. That's not my expertise, so I can't comment on that. But I know that there is a lot of investment and there is research on that, and hopefully we'll see them.
And then we'll throw to the room in just a moment. So if you're sitting on a burning question, we're coming to you. But one other from our online audience who are very active and have many more questions. Is mulesing actually better for avoiding fly strike than crutching?
Oh, wow. That is a good question, because one of the things that we looked in this project, we did a deep dive in the literature. We wanted to look at the evidence for the effectiveness of mulesing, and there's no recent studies looking at incidence of fly strike comparing mules versus unmules flocks. The studies that we have are quite old. I think the latest is in the 60s. So one of the things that we want to do now is update those results, go on farm and actually comparing the prevalence of fly strike of mules versus unmules flocks and see some effectiveness in that with more updated data, because we are asking producers, but producers are not keeping accurate records. It's sort of like on top of their head, sort of guesstimates of prevalence, and we're seeing that, some interesting results on that.
Jeremy, do you want to check if there's anyone in the?
Yeah.
Now,
Just shout.
We've got microphones.
Microphones.
Right. It's for Carol as well.
Yep.
What do you think it will take to shift the attitudes from not believing that they can't stop mulesing to, breeding sheep that don't need mulesing?
Yeah.
What do we need to do?
That's a great question, Nat. So one of the things that I was very interested in was sort of like profiling the attitudes of producers that are running mules enterprises with the ones that are not running or decided to phase out. And what's interesting, the ones that decided to phase out, or they're definitely not running mules operations and are quite proactive in moving the industry towards that side, one of the things that stood out the most is their perception of the public perception of mulesing and the social license risk. They're more aware and they think they're more important for them in the long run, where the producers that are running mules enterprises are more in the headspace of we need to educate the public about fly strike and justifying why they're doing what they're doing. Because in their core, for them, is the best thing that they can do for the welfare of the animals because, they're not just doing mulesing because they want to do an open wound. That's truly what they think is the best for the sheep, for fly strike prevention, whether the other producers are more so in the space of we need to listen to consumers and we need to work towards that market.
Any other questions in the room? I've got, you go.
Oh, there's one up here.
Oh, right.
One for Lauren. The ProHand for pigs has been widely adopted. I've got a question about ProHand for dairy. You say you're working in the US. I wonder, would the program differ from the intensive type system that's in the US compared to a pasture-based system in Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, it has a little. So obviously with the slightly different industries and the nature or slight difference perhaps in some of those interactions, we have had to adjust and to ensure that we're including the broad range of behaviours. So it's based upon the ProHand program for here, but obviously, as you mentioned, in the US, we perhaps see a more intensive indoor type system where we potentially have other key interactions that are impacting welfare. Did you have a question too, though, about the uptake with regards to dairy or?
No, I appreciate it's been very slow.
Yes, it has, which, yes, probably a number of factors for that too, but hopefully, obviously now the increased interest within the US, but also the revision here and the work that we're doing with Saputo and making it broadly available for both the Australian and the New Zealand industries, which I think is a really positive step. So.
I've got a question, right? So stay there. Intensive industries have always been under pressure for enrichment, right? And it's going to increase. Now, looking at the programme here, we haven't got really anything about enrichment in there. So is that a gap we're missing at the centre? I mean, we're talking about human enrichment, which is very important.
Yeah.
But what about, resource enrichment?
Yeah, really important. And when we're talking about enrichment, I think we need to be talking about what is effective enrichment. So we often see things that are talked about in terms of enrichment, but we don't actually have any evidence that they're used or that they are actually bringing about positive experiences. So looking at changes within biological functioning. So I think there's clearly a need for that, and it's certainly something that we would look to explore. But I think one area that we are really focused on is the opportunity for those human-animal interactions and those positive interactions to be used as enrichment, because we do know that they bring about positive experiences for the animal. So some of the work that we are doing has looked at the delivery of positive human contact, for example, in pigs during lactation, but there's also ongoing need to then look at through later stages as well, and the opportunity that brings for enrichment, but also for the animal, but also for the human. So if we're thinking about opportunities for enrichment, and we often see a lot of challenges or potential barriers raised around the use of enrichment. In Australia, we know there are challenges when it comes to our intensive pig systems in using straw and bedding provide not only thermal comfort, but they also provide opportunities for pigs to perform those highly motivated behaviours that are rewarding. So exploration, foraging and whatnot. But we know that that can be really quite difficult within our current system. So it is important that we explore these opportunities that are feasible and can be implemented. And sounds like a bit of a pitch, but I think positive human contact is a really important one.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Time for one more. Yes.
It's to Caroline, and it's regarding mulesing again.
Yep.
Just one thought about the use of chemicals for it and the reluctance of the producers.
Yeah.
Because of the association of producers being using so many chemicals, and the detriment effect that it might have on the producers may be something that you might want to address, say, in jetting fly strike. So it just, the use of chemicals in with the farmers and the producers might be something that you might want to address in that whole issue.
That's right. Yes, yes. And there are programs now funded by MLA and AWI trying to support farmers' transition. And one of the things that they're looking at is providing that information about the importance of chemical resistance and how they can address that, and the adequate use of chemicals and the different type of chemicals that they can use. So supporting them with giving them those tools and that knowledge to be more certain about their management and be more confident about what are they doing instead of mulesing, because that's one of the main challenges. I think what they're missing is the engagement with the consumers and the general public, but definitely a big thing for producers trying to be confident with that. Yeah.
Thanks, Cara. And we have one last question from the online audience.
Yeah, so I think probably, Lauren, it's going to be you again. And just for everyone who is online, please feel free to email your questions through to our researchers if they're burning questions that you really want to get answers from. You can Google us up and find our university email addresses online. So, Lauren, someone's asked, is there an opportunity to apply the ProHand principles or the actual program to other animal care fields, such as zoos and vet clinics and animal shelters?
Absolutely, yes. So the ProHand programs that I've talked about today have largely focused around animal handling within the livestock industries, because that's where I guess there's been great pressure around the implications of fear on productivity, but also on welfare. But when we're talking about, I guess, ProHand and those sequential relationships between human attributes and animal welfare and outcomes, as we saw Maddie talk about, as we saw Cara talk about, as some of my PhD work looked at, we actually are looking at human behaviour not only with regards to handling, but also the decisions that they make with regards to management as well, and to monitoring and all forms of human behaviour or decisions that effectively then play a part when it comes to welfare. So looking at the choices that they make with regards to decisions around tail length, decisions around whether to mules or not to mules. If we're thinking about horses, decisions that they make with regards to how they house their horses, their frequency of parasite control, dental care, whatnot, all of those key decisions. If we're thinking about zoo animals as well, as I mentioned, we've done a lot of work that's looked at visitor effects, but now that important work that can start to explore keepers. So attitudes towards the type of interactions they have, this amount of time that they spend with their animals, some of the different behaviours that they also have control over. So essentially, we can be looking to use the principles of ProHand, those human-animal interactions, human-animal relationship across all forms of animal use, companion, our working animals as well. So the opportunities are endless.
Thanks, Lauren. Well, we'll stop now. So first of all, I'd just like you to thank all our speakers in the first session. Thank you.